As we drift off to sleep, our brains begin to do some strange things. Our eyes move rapidly from side to side, even though we're totally oblivious to the world around us. And we might mumble, twitch, or even talk in our sleep. But perhaps the most remarkable thing that happens when we sleep is that we forget where we are. We lose ourselves in a series of bizarre, often nonsensical scenarios that seem utterly real at the time, but disappear completely from our memories by the next morning. Why does this happen? What is the purpose of forgetting yourself in a world of make-believe every night? Hi, I'm here to introduce you to this channel. We all experience this phenomenon of forgetting ourselves while we sleep, but until recently, we didn't have any idea why. Scientists used to believe that dreaming was just the brain's way of working through unresolved issues from the day. But today, we know there's more to it than that. In fact, researchers have found that REM sleep, the phase of sleep during which we dream, is actually essential for our mental well-being. After all, animals don't dream. Well, except for maybe dolphins and maybe rats. And humans can get by without dreaming. People who suffer from a condition called dream apnea can go their whole lives without ever having a dream. But they also tend to suffer from anxiety, depression, and mood disorders at higher rates than the general population, suggesting that dreaming is crucial for our emotional health. So why does our brain need to forget itself every night? The first step towards answering this question is figuring out what happens when we forget ourselves in a dream. When you're awake, your brain is constantly gathering information from the outside world. Your ears pick up sounds, your eyes see shapes and colors, and your skin registers temperature and pressure. All of that information gets sent to the thalamus, a region of the brain that acts like an airport information desk, directing everything to the correct department for processing. For example, visual information gets sent to the visual cortex, where you perceive the color blue, and auditory information gets sent to the auditory cortex, where you perceive the sound of a bell. But when you fall asleep, the thalamus starts sending information to another part of your brain, the pons, which sits right above the medulla oblongata. It's a kind of sensory relay center that was once thought to be dormant during sleep. But now we know it's a bustling hub of activity. The pons receives input from the thalamus and then sends signals to the rest of your brain, effectively putting the brakes on further incoming sensory information. As a result, you become unconscious and the world around you disappears. Meanwhile, while you're sleeping, the pons also activates to other parts of your brain, the basal forebrain and the reticular activating system, which work together to turn down the volume on random brain activity. This is what allows you to sleep through your alarm clock rather than being woken up by random background noise. These regions also send signals back to the thalamus to switch it from processing mode to storage mode. That means instead of sending information to the visual and auditory cortices, the thalamus starts stashing visual and auditory information away for later. This is why you might remember a particularly vivid dream upon waking, but can't recall anything from the hour or so before that. Your brain wasn't actively processing anything. It was just storing experiences for future reprocessing. Now that the pons has turned down background noise, and your brain is no longer receiving input from the outside world, free to do something else. Activate your hippocampus, which is responsible for storing long-term memories. At this point, your brain is in a state of limbo, and the only thing keeping it there is your heartbeat. If you were to stop being alive, you would stop dreaming. So your brain tries to keep you alive, just in case something important comes along that you need to remember. But it turns out that's not the only reason you dream. There's another structure in your brain that needs to stay active while you're sleeping. The amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions. Scientists think that the amygdala keeps you stuck in this alternate reality you create in your dreams, so you can safely practice dealing with emotionally charged situations, otherwise known as your brain's flight or fight center. The amygdala becomes active whenever you encounter something that could be dangerous. It's like a bear, or something that could earn you a reward, like a bowl of honey. Whenever this happens, it activates the prefrontal cortex, which decides whether the stimulus is actually threatening. And if it is, it tells your body to run away or stay still and hope you don't get eaten. But these reactions don't always make sense in the context of a dream. You might find yourself fleeing from a non-existent threat or running towards a pot of honey at the end of a rainbow. In other words, the amygdala activates the parts of your brain responsible for processing emotions. Even though none of the regions receiving those signals actually exist, according to neuroscientist Mark Solms, This is because the amygdala doesn't actually need to process what the stimulus is. It just needs to know whether it's good or bad. So it bypasses higher-order thinking and goes straight to emotion. It's unclear exactly why your brain needs to do this, but scientists speculate that it could be practicing for life-threatening situations that you might face in the future. In other words, the same stimulus doesn't need to be a bear, a pot of honey, or a dream monster. The amygdala will react the same way to all of them, because it's only interested in three things: reward, fear, or nothing. It turns out that this isn't the only reason you dream. Another scientist, John Allen Hobson, thinks that dreams are simply the brain's way of making sense of random neural activity. He proposed that the brain generates random patterns of neural activity while we sleep, and that these patterns then get interpreted by the amygdala, which assigns them emotional significance. So, when you dream, your brain is kind of playing a game with itself, throwing a bunch of random information at the amygdala and seeing what story it can make up about it, regardless of whether you dream about a realistic scenario or a bizarre one. Your brain processes those experiences in the exact same way. A study published in 2022 found that both mundane and unrealistic dreams activated the same regions of the brain. In other words, your brain doesn't know the difference between a purple elephant and a yellow banana. They're both just weird and unreal, so it reacts to them in the same way. The researchers propose that the brain generates random patterns of neural activity during REM sleep, but it also actively filters out inconsistencies and gaps in that activity. So if a purple elephant appears in your dream, your brain will fill in the blanks and create a plausible scenario where elephants come in all sorts of colors. This could explain why dreams seem so real. They're not based on reality, but they're also not totally random. Your brain is actively trying to make sense of the jumbled mess of neural activity happening inside your head. Ultimately, we don't really know why we forget ourselves in a world of make-believe every night. But the scientific consensus seems to be that it's a way for our brain to deal with emotions. Even if those emotions aren't tied to a real stimulus, the amygdala still needs to practice assigning them to things. And the rest of your brain needs to practice creating scenarios that make sense, even if those scenarios are completely absurd. Researchers are still working to unravel the mysteries of the brain, but thanks to their hard work, we're learning more about ourselves every day. Thanks for watching this episode, which was brought to you by the incredible community of supporters. Make it possible for us to bring mind-blowing science videos to everyone for free. If you want to join this amazing community, click the link in the description.